All right, folks. Today we're going to start off with a quote from my man Dave Grohl. There's no context for this, but it's part The Shining, part Amityville, part Evil Dead. Fuck it. We might as well make a horror movie. And that turned into Studio 666. And I guess, if we're going to really break it down, that is a sort of an underrated horror gem of 2022. Brendan, feel free to chime in about that. I just wanted to read that because me and Brendan both have an affinity for Studio 666, and I thought it would kick off our little horror escapade today. But yeah, Brendan's my guest today, my roommate slash writing partner slash good friend slash horror nerd. Thank you, man. Thanks for coming on.
I'm happy to be on. It's a long-awaited, opportunity for me.
You've been dreaming about it. Do you want to give your quick thought? Just because I set up Studio 666, I feel like we've been dying to talk about it publicly because no one talks about Studio 666 ever.
Oh, definitely, man. I think it's one of those movies this year that you're kind of shocked at a theatrical release. And when you watch it, it's so zany and so wacky. You're just kind of shocked it was made in the first place. And I think that goes to say with our list ahead of us, these are just movies that don't get the love. They don't get the acclaim enough, and that's why we want to throw them out there to the audience. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And not even to hark back on Studio 666, but that was a horror movie. There's a lot of underrated horror movies this year, which even can make for another list. But my list was kind of inspired by just kind of movies that people don't usually recommend. I don't think we're going super deep cut, right? We're not ultra underground sort of whatever subgenre of horror is the most obscure. I think we're just kind of going for normal movie fans like us, what are some 5 horror gems that no one talks about. So but before we do that, I thought we would do, just because the Cinebums usually do a sort of what have we been watching recently, just kind of a fun little just, if you're scrolling through Letterboxd and you go down your diary, and obviously it's been October, so I think we've been going pretty hard on the horror movies. So, what's something you watched in the past, two weeks, I'd say, that stands out?
Yeah, I think I have a couple movies here, but I'll name specifically 2 of them. One I watched recently was Bones by Ernest Dickerson.
Ooh, and Jimmy Bones.
Yeah, Jimmy Bones, Snoop Dogg himself. I was really blown away by the movie. I know Ernest Dickerson is always a great director. Obviously, you've shown me, Tales from
the Crypt, Demon Knight, which is the movie adaptation of the show.
Exactly.
Which is a great movie, by the way. That's another kind of underrated horror movie.
It is, and Bones is exactly like that. People were joking, oh, Snoop Dogg can't act, but he's actually really great in the role, and it's one of the few times in a horror movie when you actually care about the ghost. And sometimes those kind of horror stories are the ones that I attach myself to the most.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ernest Dickerson, too, he was a DP for Spike Lee for a long time. Shot some of his most iconic movies. And I imagine that Bones, I haven't seen it, but I'm sure, visually it's pretty rich. Because, I remember even Demon Knight, the camera movement and everything is really unique for a horror movie, So, yeah, I loved Ernest Dickerson, and it's definitely been on my list for a while. I'll have to borrow your shout factory there, man.
Oh, yeah, definitely. What's one for you?
Oh, there's so many. Everyone talks about Child's Play. I've recently watched the first Child's Play, and I loved it. I'll just leave it at that. I kind of want to talk about something more interesting, which is something we watched together, which was Eaten Alive by Tobe Hooper, which we kind of just watched together on a whim. We saw it on Shudder, and it looked good. And to me, that movie was in kind of the peak of Tobe Hooper's career, coming off of Texas Chainsaw. It was between that, I believe, Funhouse and Life Force came after that, I think. But he was getting studio funding probably, because before that he was just doing underground horror movies, leading up to Texas Chainsaw. And I feel Eaten Alive was kind of his big breakout movie, in terms of showing all of his sensibilities, because it's just absolutely insane. Stylistically, it's just balls to the wall. The lighting's so crazy. The energy is really unnerving and really kind of grates on you. But I think that's what Tobe Hooper does best. So for me, it was a 5-star movie. What'd you think about it? Because I think we kind of had a fun time watching it together.
It was a blast. Honestly, it was a twisted 70s blast.
It is.
It just has such a gnarly kind of grindhouse feel to it. I think I said it perfectly after the movie. I'm like, I need to take a shower after this, you know?
It just makes you feel absolutely filthy.
Yeah.
But it kind of similar to watching the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You're just like, it feels like a movie you'd find like at a gas station or something, like in a cassette tape or something. It feels like kind of like a snuff movie in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because like that's going into our theme of our full video. I think that's like one of Hooper's lesser known, more like obscure movies, and I thought it was like an amazing horror movie, like really idiosyncratic and like really unique. So yeah, is there any others you've watched in the past like week that you want to shout out? Doesn't have to be a horror movie.
Yeah. Other than that, I think another one that really blew me away was Phantom of the Paradise.
Oh yeah,
you showed me that one about 2 weekends ago.
Nice.
And it really blew me away. I have a love for movies that really know how to insert music and use it to tell a story. And the way that movie does it, it's so beautiful. And it's such an interesting retelling of Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I just love when a filmmaker like Brian De Palma in this situation can really reinvent a classic that we all know and love and just make it their own, and it's totally ripped away from the original.
And like have a really great satirical look at the music industry of the time and really tragic story. Like few De Palma movies like I'm that really invested in the character emotionally. In terms of like his horror stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely Carrie and other exceptions, but like Phantom of the Paradise is like a really empathetic movie, but also like at the same time, I think we talked about it after the movie, like really hysterical and really high energy. So obviously that's like a personal favorite of mine. I've talked about De Palma on the pod a lot. So yeah, man, I'm glad you loved it though. The last one I'll talk about, not a horror movie, but I actually just watched it today, and I don't know if you saw me log in on Letterboxd, but I watched Force Majeure by Ruben Östlund, which is I'm kind of ashamed I haven't seen any of his movies because he has a new movie, Triangle of Sadness, coming out. So I'm like, you know what? Now it's time to actually get into his movies because they're always like so well acclaimed at like the Cannes Film Festival, and everyone talks about him as like a really promising filmmaker. I guess he's like really well established now for sure, but Triangle of Sadness, like he won the top prize at Cannes, so I've been like really interested in getting into this guy's work. And Force Majeure is a really fascinating movie, man. Like I kind of thought going in it would be more of a satirical, sort of lighthearted movie with dark elements, because like for those who don't know, it's about a family that goes away to a ski resort, and an avalanche occurs, and it kind of sets off this really troubling family dynamic and sort of argument that goes on for the rest of the vacation. And it was really dark and really twisted, but it was kind of felt like an observational movie where you're kind of just watching this family slowly deteriorate sort of their veneer, like their persona, like on the surface, like because they're kind of like a wealthy family, and it really digs deep into their like psychology and like their relationships. So it was like a really interesting film. Yeah, like he has a really distinct style, like the way his movies look. He'll hold the camera like in one shot, like sort of like a wide shot, and like all of his subjects and his actors are in the shot, and it'll be like a 10-minute scene. So stylistically, it's really interesting. And yeah, like I know a lot of people have talked about that movie. It was a big deal like 5 years ago. I'm just late to the party, but yeah, I really loved it, man. Like it's a really good movie, and like I had like a great script, really unique tone, like a really solid movie. Next, I want to watch The Square, which was his film, is his follow up to that movie, which seems more divisive. Like a lot of people say it's extremely slow and pretentious. So I'm definitely excited to check that one out, and of course, Triangle of Sadness comes out. So yeah, man, Ruben Östlund, definitely want to see more of his movies. It was a great like entry point, Force Majeure.
Yeah, he's a director to look out for.
Yeah, you check out Ruben Östlund, guys, if you haven't. Yeah, and Triangle of Sadness opens up. I mean, I don't know about nationwide, but for us, it comes out really soon. So I'm definitely excited to check that one out. So, all right, guys, let's just get to the list. Our top 5 horror movie gems, underrated horror movies, and Brendan's gonna lead us off. He has a few honorable mentions, as do I. So we're gonna run through those honorable mentions now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just before we get to our list, of course, I have 3 I could think about right now that I think are noteworthy. Dolls from Stuart Gordon. I showed Jake this movie last Halloween season, and
great movie.
It's great. I mean, it's really like a fantasy fairy tale disguised as a slasher movie with these little miniature dolls that come alive. Almost a haunted house type of way. But yeah, I just love the style of it. I absolutely love the stop motion effects.
Oh yeah, totally.
It's one of those movies that I feel like if I watch as a kid or a teenager, it could be such a great introduction to the horror genre. It kind of felt like even Gremlins-esque a little bit, where it kind of gears towards like a child's sensibilities, like even the way the movie is made, but it's like through the eyes of Stuart Gordon, so it's like really crazy and really bleak at times too. But like ultimately, like that's one of his more lighthearted movies, I would say, in a strange way. But yeah, that was a great one. I love all of Stuart Gordon's movies for sure. Exactly. And my other 2 quickly is I loved Madhouse. This is a movie from 1981, and it's about a woman who's pursued by her twin sister leading up on the days to her birthday. So it's just a very interesting kind of giallo-esque American production. So it's really well shot. It's a very different kind of slasher. You go into it thinking of maybe something a little schlocky, but it actually has this great story. And when you find out all the little, twists about it, it's just kind of a really dark and, vengeful movie.
That's my list.
Yeah, definitely. I always recommend that. Not enough people have seen it at all. And another one I'll add to my list that I really have an appreciation for was yesterday we watched Horror Express.
Oh, nice.
And I want to comment on that one. Not enough people have seen it, and it's a kind of Spanish and British co-production, and it's just a really interesting movie. I mean, Jake and I said after, it kind of blends 4 different genres or 4 different stories into one mishmash. But you once you get sucked into the story and everything starts happening, you don't want to turn away, and it's so ahead of its time.
Absolutely,
its messages and themes, and it even had a little bit to say about religion in there.
And
curses. So
it's one of the things that gets you off the religious themes.
Always, always in a movie.
For sure. No, that was a great one. We watched that last night, and we kind of made a direct comparison to John Carpenter's The Thing. No spoilers, of course, but there's a creature that sort of starts affecting people's persona, and you don't know quite who to trust. So there's like a mystery element to it. There's like you said, a religious element to it. It really had a lot of different. It's blending a lot of different tones. What we said, like a lot of different sort of archetypes of storytelling. Like the train movie, but it was also like there was cult aspects to it. There's religious. There was slasher elements. It combined a lot of different things to make a really good overall horror movie. So yeah, I love that one too.
How about yours?
I'll do my 3 honorable mentions real quick. The first one's really obscure. I haven't really talked to anyone that has seen this movie, but it's the Transfiguration, which is a movie that came out in I believe 2016, it's about a young boy who lives in, I believe, Harlem in New York, and a really beaten down and troubled neighborhood in Harlem, and he strikes up a relationship with a young vampire, and it's a really, really great little horror movie, super low budget, but it was straight to Netflix. Obviously, it has a lot to say about wealth disparity and sort of the wealth gap in New York and all this great stuff, but it's also a really great vampire love story about a young teenage boy who's finding his place in the world, and this girl kind of helps him And yeah, that's a great one, man. Like no one ever talks about it, but like I really connected to it on a, in a really deep way. And I love a good vampire movie, like rooted in reality, and that's kind of what it was. So definitely check that one out. Wendigo is another one, which is a Larry Fessenden movie that came out in 2002. I'm gonna bring him back later because I have another movie actually in my top 5. But Wendigo is his second best movie in my opinion. He's a super underrated horror filmmaker. He founded Glass Eye Pix, which is like a small independent horror company in New York, and which I'll talk about more later because that really relates to the other movie I'm talking about. But yeah, Wendigo is awesome, man. Like it's a movie about a family that kind of goes on a trip in an area that used to be occupied by Native Americans, and they sort of start getting hunted down by a mysterious creature. And it has a lot to say about like genocide and of course like Native American territory and some great themes like that. And it's really creepy and really interestingly told. So I absolutely love that movie. So I had to pick that. The last honorable mention I got to say is Nightmare Beach, which Brendan and I actually saw at the Music Box Theater. They were doing these outdoor screenings, I remember, like on the patio during COVID. So it kind of gave you like a really drive-in feel, I guess you could say. And we saw Nightmare Beach there, which is directed by Umberto Lenzi, who's like an Italian horror filmmaker. And we just had a blast watching it, honestly. Like it was really sleazy. It's dubbed terribly like most Italian horror movies. And it kind of explores American party culture like in a really backwards way because he's an Italian guy. So there's a lot of like unintentional comedy for sure, and that's part of why I love it. But honestly, like the filmmaking in that movie is really solid, and like there's a lot of tension and mystery. Like it's kind of a subversion of a giallo movie because it's like it's not typical slasher tropes in the movie. It was more of it kind of blends comedy and like I don't know, would you say like sci-fi elements? Because there's like the kills are like really straight odd in that movie. I just try to pick the most out there and like I guess unique Italian horror movie because there's so many great ones you could talk about, like Lucio Fulci and Mario Bava, obviously. But also just because we have a really funny memory of seeing that movie at the Music Box, I had to bring that one up. And I bought the Blu-ray because like I would definitely watch it again. It was so much fun. So yeah, guys, those are the honorable mentions, man. You could do your number 5, and I'll do my number 5. We'll just switch back and forth if you want to do it that way.
Yeah, for sure, that works for me.
Yeah, you go ahead, go first.
Yeah. The first movie I want to talk about, I kind of want to kick off with a bang on my list.
Oh man!
And, shit! This to me is one of Wes Craven. One of the horror masters,
Definitely a master.
If there was a Mount Rushmore of horror figures, he would probably be up there.
He's definitely up there. Yeah, he's definitely up there.
But one of his lesser known movies that I know not enough people either love or not enough people have seen is Shocker. This is from 1989, and it's about a serial killer who is sent to the electric chair, who uses electricity to come back from the dead and carry out his vengeance on the football player who turned him into the police.
Of course.
Already, it's just batshit, it's insane.
Yeah, really out there.
It is. And what I want to highlight about it before I start talking about it, it's Peter Berg is the main character.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, Mitch Pileggi is the serial killer who's hunting after him. Heather Langenkamp, makes an appearance. Even Ted Raimi's in it for a little bit.
I didn't know that. Wow.
It's overall just has a really interesting cast. But what I really love about it was Wes Craven came back to the drawing board. He had a lot of flops, and in the 80s especially.
Definitely.
And he wanted to do a movie that he thought could spawn some sequels because he didn't get enough money from Nightmare on Elm Street. So he thought of this idea, Shocker. And originally he wanted it to be a TV series. Didn't quite work out like that. And obviously there was never even a sequel for it. But if anything, I find that even more fascinating about the movie. The movie in itself has 2 parts to it. The first, no spoilers, but the first half is more of this crime, coming of age even film. And then the second half is kind of a horror comedy. It's very unique how he kind of blends both of these together, like he always does, you know?
Right, yeah.
But I thought it just worked so well for this story, and I had an absolute blast with it. Eventually, you know, Wes Craven, he always has, you know, strong themes and things to say about the world too. And,
oh, for sure.
You know, at this time, everyone was obsessed with media and the television set, so that's why he created this character of, you know, Horace Pinker, who literally survives from the electric chair and can go through TVs, through telephone wires, and kind of kill those inhabitants. And then he could also kind of play with time in that way too. But I think he had a lot to say about where we were, especially towards the end of the 80s, about media consumption, and especially about the death penalty. I think that's another one of the main themes about the movie is it right to kill off someone who maybe has done horrible things? And from there, he just tells this fascinating and very, very interesting effects towards the end too, you know, almost B-movie-esque, but I loved them. You know, you see them fighting inside of famous episodes from old TV shows. And, you know, it's
that's
just
fun.
It's just a blast of a movie. And I'd really recommend anyone that's hesitant about it from its rating to really check it out yourself. And I think you might share the same opinion as hopefully I do.
Sweet. Yeah, that's definitely been on my watch list for a while. You know, I've seen most of Craven's work. Like People Under the Stairs and Serpent and the Rainbow are ones that I definitely want to check out soon, because people always rave about them as, like, you know, obviously he's got the Scream franchise and Nightmare and Last House on the Left. But yeah, that's definitely one that people don't bring up as much. So definitely check that one out, you know, and I'm definitely intrigued to now for sure. So my number 5 is fitting because it is actually Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers.
Oh, great.
Which, man, guys, it's hard to justify this one because this is definitely one of the most derided of the Halloween sequels, but I don't know. I mean, over time, I remember when I was a kid, I would watch all the Halloween sequels on AMC. I think we talked about that. Because every October they would binge them all, like I think the last week or two of October, which was always fun. And when I was a kid, like say like 10 or 11, I saw the first Halloween and I was always intrigued by the sequels, but everyone just talked about how terrible they were. And I saw them, and I tended to agree, especially like 6 and 7, like the ones toward the latter half. I know you love 6. But yeah, I rewatched them all leading up to David Gordon Green's Halloween, 1 through even the Rob Zombie ones, pretty much all of them. And there's something about 5 that I thought felt really October-y, mostly. I think the set design and like the way the movie was shot. I know the director, I can't even pronounce his name. He hasn't done anything else, but I feel like the overall look of him as well as Michael Myers, like it feels really October-y, just like the original Halloween did. And obviously there's a ton of storytelling moments that make no sense to that movie, and there's a lot of horrible acting. Like, it's not a well-made movie, but I just really enjoy the set pieces. I think Michael Myers is really menacing. I like Donald Pleasance kind of going down the rabbit hole of insanity, like constantly just shouting at a little girl throughout the whole movie. Like, it's definitely, I'd say, the one movie on this list that's just like definitely a guilty pleasure. And I just, you know, I hope it holds up when I rewatch it in like, you know, a few years or so. But yeah, I kind of have, I think we talked about this. Like, I think we both kind of dig the Halloween sequels more than most people would. Like, we obviously love 3. I know you love 4, but 5 for me is the one that I would say is like top 3 Halloween movies, which is both nostalgic, but also, I genuinely think it's a solid horror movie. So yeah.
There's something fun about the beginning of that movie too, because the ending of 4 is amazing.
Amazing, yeah.
Might be one of the best endings of that whole series.
Really
one of
shocking,
them.
no spoilers.
And once it kind of delves into 5, and you kind of get accustomed with these teenagers, and it has a great opening. I'll say that.
Right.
And she's Daniel Harris is in the psychiatric ward. Donald Pleasance is like losing his mind. He looks like he's about to die, like in his face. He's
on the cusp of death.
Yeah. He just. It's a great mention. It's a great mention. Yeah, we really do love those sequels, even if there's some storytelling flaws.
There's a lot.
They put you in that fall spirit. There's something about
the thing, dude.
There's something about like getting a blanket and maybe turning on a nice fall candle and just putting on those movies.
No, that's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly why. Because not even to shit on the new David Gordon Green movies, but they definitely don't give me that October feeling like these sequels do.
Yeah.
And it might be nostalgic value, like I said, watching it on AMC and stuff. But yeah, and 5 is definitely, like I said, the most derided and hated one. And I think it's pretty good. So that's my number 5. Yeah, what's your number 4 on your list?
Yeah, my number 4. I wanted to add in a foreign recommendation on this list, so I picked a Uruguay movie here in Spanish. It's called The Last Matinee. This is from 2020. It was actually one of those movies that was released on VOD, and I read the synopsis. It's about on a stormy night in Montevideo, an engineering student named Anna takes over the duties of her father, a projectionist at a declining movie theater. Unbeknownst to her, the audience watching the film that she's running starts being murdered by a crazed killer. I think there's something, not only about the release of the movie, I wanted to watch something at home and just overall find some comfort while all that crazy shit was going on outside.
Yeah.
And this movie weirdly provided it for me. It's basically a Spanish version of Italian giallo. It definitely has a love for the 70s kind of horror and even some American slashers from the 80s. But I always thought, to me, a movie theater could be one of the most unsafe places. You never know what can happen when the lights dim and when there's really no sound and all you hear is that movie in front of you. And this movie is really is somewhat terrifying in that way. The killer slowly killing people from their seats, or people going up to the bathroom and getting murdered in the bathroom.
Yeah. Like Scream 2 or something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just a really fun, well-made, love letter to that type of filmmaking, and that's what I adored about it. It didn't take itself too seriously either. It had fun with its plot, and it's super underrated. I see on Letterboxd only like 7,000 people have seen it even.
Oh wow.
But I totally recommend it. And also on top of that, it's totally just the violence and how gnarly of a movie it is. It gets really disturbing, probably because it is more of a foreign movie than what America would probably censor. So it really goes all the way, but also has this great plot about do you want to take over for your parents' job? Some parents tell you, oh, you have to be this, you have to be that. And for her, she really doesn't want to be a projectionist. She wants to study. But in this situation, she really has to face it and kind of learn how to be a projectionist, which I always thought was interesting. Like, how do you work the reels? So there's a lot about it that if you're just a fan of movies, you will absolutely love the setting and your love.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Your love how everything happens in that movie. Yeah.
It's like Lamberto Bava's Demons that all takes place in the movie theater. It's always fun when there's a horror movie that kind of gets really meta and starts kind of using that location to its advantage, storytelling wise in a theater, because there's so much to do usually. So yeah, is that streamable? Like, is that Shudder original or something?
Yeah, I think it might be streamable, but I do own it too. I was so in love with it, I had to buy it.
Oh wow!
So
if anyone wants to watch it, who to borrow it from.
Yeah. Just call me and I'll deliver it to your house. No.
Yeah, there you go.
What's yours?
Cool. My number 4 is actually kind of similar to yours, where it came out in 2020, and also was elevated by the COVID-19 pandemic. But mine's a movie called The Beach House, which, like I said, released in 2020, directed by Jeffrey A. Brown. The plot, real quick, is very standard issue. At least the setup is very foundational. It's a really young couple, 2 college sweethearts, I guess you can call them, go to, I think it was the girl, her family owned a lake house, and they go just to get away for just a nice vacation together But I think about 20 minutes in, an older couple show up saying that they are friends with her parents. And I think she remembers them. And it sort of becomes like a really uncomfortable sort of situation. You know, they're sharing the house. You think it might go into maybe slasher territory or psychological horror or something of that sort, but it kind of subverts your expectations because they're on the beach and they start noticing like weird neon lights and sort of weird kind of shapes and kind of plant extensions from the beach start coming closer to the house. And obviously it kind of just devolves into like an environmental horror movie. And obviously in 2020, you know, that felt really relevant and kind of needed. And it kind of felt like a cross between like Cronenberg, Carpenter, and, you know, body horror. You know, it just became body horror, and it kind of came out of nowhere. And that's what kind of fucked me up about it. Because it's like a really, really strong character story, like about 30 minutes in, then it kind of just devolves into this crazy bad shit environmental allegory, and they kind of fight for survival because I think whatever comes out of the ocean starts mutating and affecting them mentally, which you can kind of mirror that to like when people talk about, you know, the glaciers in Antarctica start melting and weird diseases are going to start coming out. You know, they couldn't mess with us psychologically, we don't know. And that's what the beach house kind of explored. And there's no explanation ever. It's like a really, really confusing and really daunting antagonist throughout the movie. And you really just don't know. And I love how disorienting it feels. And some really great gore, some really great kills, and some really fun. And even though I'm painting it as really bleak and like kind of environmentally conscious horror movie, it's a really fun sort of survival horror movie. And like you said about the COVID thing coming out in like 2020, that movie's all about claustrophobia and kind of your mind melting from cabin fever, and that's what that movie kind of explores. And I put it on the list because like I don't hear a lot of people talk about it, and I think it's a really solid straight to Shudder movie. So if you have Shudder, definitely check out The Beach House. You will not be let down if you're a horror fan.
Yeah, I really have to check that one out. It sounds super interesting to me.
It's very interesting. Yeah.
The next one I have is also a movie deeply rooted with some strong themes about our current world order or society in itself. This is Land of the Dead by George Romero.
Georgie boy.
George Romero, another person who could maybe fit on the Mount Rushmore of horror.
Mount Rushmore contender. Yeah.
You know, and everyone knows him for Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living, Day of the Dead, and you know, I think they all know what he looked like, you know, but no one ever wants to talk about the movies he did post 2000s.
Right.
Yes, he didn't, you know, take money and, you know, try to make, you know, movie after movie. He really took his time to think of a strong trilogy of movies here that he put out in the 2000s about zombies. And, you know, him being the grandfather of zombies, I think he had a lot to say here with Land of the Dead. It's about a world full of zombies, and the survivors have barricaded themselves inside a walled-up city to keep out the living dead. As the wealthy hide out in the skyscrapers and chaos rules the streets, the rest of the survivors must find a way to stop the evolving zombies from breaking into the city. This movie has an interesting cast. Dennis Hopper is the villain.
That's right, yeah.
If that doesn't sell you already, Jake, I don't know what will.
That definitely sells me. You had me at Romero. I'll see anything you make.
Yeah. John Leguizamo's in it. Asia Argento's in it.
Oh, yeah.
Robin Ward. It's an interesting cast for that time. And it's definitely his biggest budget that he had probably all throughout his whole career, I'd have to say, in terms of the sets and his extras here. But I think he had a lot to say here, not only from the synopsis, but about wealth disparity, about world order, about who can be protected or is not protected. So it's very interesting. And I really do love, they have a character in this movie. I think is his name Anchor? Is it Anchor? I think I'm thinking of right now. But he always has that character in his movie, a lovable zombie who doesn't, like in Day of the Dead, doesn't have all those zombie features, but is actually humanistic. And like I said earlier, I love when there's something that's traditionally kind of monster-like is actually lovable, or you kind of care for. And in this movie, he creates one that's kind of walking around and seeing everything as it is. And it was just very interesting in that way. But not only that, the action is great. And like I said, just the amount of extras he has makes this whole city and situation very real and livable. I think one of the things, this is the quote that I have. Oh, that was the name of the guy, Big Daddy, who's walking around. He's just this really tall zombie. He could totally stand out from the crowd. Yeah. But this is what I really said about it. I said I always enjoyed when Romero treats the zombies as if they're humans like us. And again, he goes back to that tropes of, it's the real humans in our world that are worse than the zombies. And that's what Dennis Hopper and his, rich capitalistic friends kind of are in this film. And just a quote that I love from this movie is, they're looking for a place to go. Honestly, one of the best quotes in all of his movies, and that's in reference to the zombies, obviously, is that they're not looking to kill us, their minds are just looking for a place to go. So yeah, definitely recommend this one. I'd say throw this on for Halloween and you will not be disappointed.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the original, you can consider Romero as not only the grandfather of zombies, but like one of the first independent horror filmmakers of all time. Because Night of the Living Dead was made for a shoestring budget, and to see him come so far from that is like really cool. Still up until his death was making zombie movies, so he found his niche, and a lot of them are really great. Day of the Dead being my personal favorite. So shout out to Romero. I'm glad we could highlight him on here for sure.
Definitely, we have to.
Yeah, absolutely. My number 3 is Australian filmmaker Richard Franklin, who directed Psycho 2, which I haven't seen, but I have seen a movie he released in 1981 called Road Games, which is an amazing sort of cat and mouse thriller. So it's about a truck driver who is on. It's kind of ambiguous where the movie takes place. Obviously, they shot it in Australia, but they're all American actors. You got Stacy Keach, who's amazing in this movie, but you also got Jamie Lee Curtis, who's sort of a hitchhiker on the road. But there's essentially a serial killer out just killing people on the road in sort of like this desolate Australian highway. And Stacy Keach sort of gets caught up in these murders, and it really becomes a frightening cat and mouse game on these really desolate roads. And the movie is directed exceptionally, because I think there's a lot of tones to this movie, sort of what we were talking about with Horror Express that we were talking. There's a lot of different kind of like subcategories throughout the movie. Like there is really character driven, like Stacy Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis really get to know each other, and you really get to know sort of their backstories as characters. And obviously it's a road movie, but it's also a slasher. It's also a cat and mouse thriller. It kind of has a lot of different things going on, and extremely tense. Beautifully shot. There's some really great psychedelic sequences where Stacy Keach is sort of losing his mind on the road. He hasn't slept for like 3 days, and it kind of becomes sort of a psychological test for him. And it's just a blast of a movie. Like it's so rich in character, but it's also so great in its horror execution. And Richard Franklin directed Psycho 2, which I really want to see, because he seems like, I know like Tarantino and a lot of people always talk about the Australian new wave of movies, like in the late 70s, early 80s. And they always mention Richard Franklin. Obviously George Miller was one of them, but Richard Franklin people always talk about, and I definitely want to see more of his movies, but Road Games is absolutely an amazing movie. If you want to get it, especially if you want to get into more like, not foreign horror, but, more obscure genre, like sort of grindhouse style horror, then Road Games is definitely one to watch. It's a great one.
Definitely. Yeah, I'd second that. It's such an interesting film. It's more of a dark kind of thriller.
Yeah.
And it's fun to just kind of be stranded on the road with them throughout that whole movie and kind of see what would happen. I think that's been a fear at least in my life.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
And especially being chased or being followed by another car. I think that's a very real scenario for anyone.
People always compared it to Duel, which was Spielberg's one of his earliest features, which has a really similar plot. But I don't think it gets as gnarly and as violent as Road Games, because Road Games is more of a genre B movie. But yeah, that's my number 3. So
great one. Yeah. For me, we have 2 left already.
Yeah, we're already getting there.
Believe it or not. My second one is a movie called Bad Moon. This is another one, only 7,000 on Letterboxd if you've even seen it. But this one is about one man's struggle to contain the curse he hides within, and his last-ditch attempt to free himself with the love of his family. But when it looks as if he's losing the battle and endangering all he holds the most, the family dog is the last hope for his family's survival and the end to his werewolf curse. If you've ever wanted to see a movie where a German Shepherd fights against a werewolf and the German Shepherd is somewhat the main character of a movie, definitely watch Bad Moon.
That's great.
You don't see dogs be the main character of horror movies, and that's why I really wanted to highlight this one. This is a really short movie, 80 minutes it clocks in at. But I love when there's a new take on a familiar monster. We all know werewolf lore. We all know when the full moon's out, they're turned into the beast. But what I love about this movie's approach is it takes place in this secluded woods, and it's about a woman who tells her brother, "Hey, live with me for a little bit. We'll help you out. I know you're down on your luck." But little does she know he's a werewolf, and the German Shepherd starts sniffing around and starts hearing noises in the night, and you kind of follow from his perspective for most of the movie.
That's fun.
Yeah, it's just a fun movie. I think what I love about it is it totally feels like you're in the middle of nowhere. You're in this quiet forest. You have really no help around you. It's just it's very interesting in that way. But yeah, and then just in itself, I mean, who doesn't want to watch like a cute dog, kind of sniff around and follow things? And I mean, the dog in this movie, I know they used 3 dogs I saw online to shoot the scenes with him, but they all did such a good job. You really feel
great dog performances.
The dog performance, it rivals the opening of The Thing.
Ooh, wow. That says a lot.
It really does, yeah. And I know German Shepherds are technically like one of the smartest dogs.
Yeah,
and
high IQ.
Yeah, high IQ indeed. And on top of that, I just want to also cut in about how strong I think this script is. I know it's based off of a novel. But there's so many clever little details that I've seen this movie twice now that I've kind of picked up on. Like, for example, her brother's trailer is the size of a silver bullet.
Ooh, wow. Little Easter eggs.
Yeah, little Easter eggs like that throughout. And I don't want to spoil all of them for you guys. But it's definitely just a really interesting play on a monster movie. Very low key, probably filmed with a very shoestring budget.
Right.
But I really love when a movie you could just pull it off like this, with very little and still say a lot. I think it says a lot about family in itself. How do you trust family members, and how much do you really know about each other? I think it really does say a lot about
Interesting.
that.
Wow.
Other than that, maybe it's not as thematic as the other movies.
Sure.
But
yeah.
It's just a blast. Put it on a, when it's really quiet, and I hope you have fun with it.
Oh, it's a good endorsement.
Yeah.
I definitely want to see it now too. All right, yeah. My number 2, I teased this before when I talked about Wendigo. Larry Fessenden. I absolutely love his movies, and I think his masterpiece is Habit from 1995. I kind of talked about this earlier too with Transfiguration in my honorable mentions, where it's sort of a love story disguised as a vampire movie, and that's what Habit is too. So basically, Larry Fessenden, sort of this loser, sloppy drunk, in New York. He's living in a shitty apartment. He works at a bar. He kind of has a directionless life. So automatically he's kind of really relatable. If you're in your 20s, he's like a really relatable protagonist. And he meets a really seductive girl who happens to be a vampire. And of course, you know, if you know tropes of vampire movies, he starts having a thirst for blood and addiction and madness. And what that movie is, though, for me, felt like a really strong allegory for sex addiction and drug addiction. Because the movie's locations are really raw. Like, they're in really, you know, seedy apartments in New York, like kind of the underbelly of New York. It kind of feels like you're watching a John Cassavetes movie, kind of exploring like the more raw aspects of New York City and sort of the hecticness of it. But all in a vampire movie, you know, like it really reminds me of The Addiction, directed by Abel Ferrara, and which is also an incredible vampire movie that's highly rooted in reality. But Habit for me is like just absolutely so emotional, emotionally engaging with its characters. It's got great horror elements that feel super authentic. And yeah, man, Larry Fessenden is one of the most underrated horror filmmakers of all time. Like, he's mainly known for acting and producing. He really does it all. Like, he's in a lot of Kelly Reichardt movies. He was in You're Next. He's been in Jim Jarmusch movies. He's produced some Kelly Reichardt movies. I think some of her movies are under his production company. He produced House of the Devil by Ty West and The Innkeepers by Ty West. He's done a lot for horror independent movies, and directed, he's made a few great ones. So I just wanted to highlight Larry Fessenden because not a lot of people have seen his movies, especially Habit and Wendigo. So please check my man out. He's a great beacon of hope for aspiring directors out there. So
I need to check out more of his work because like kind of like with what I said with my film, you know, someone that could really get it done with a shoestring budget, and you just are motivated after the movie. Like, I need to finish my screenplay. I need to, you know, start shooting a movie with my friends, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
Something that it just puts a smile on your face after, and you're just so happy.
Yeah, but it's great being inspired. And I think all the movies we talked about have given us inspiration for sure.
Exactly.
And yeah,
exactly.
Shout out Larry Fessenden. He's the man. Hope you're listening.
And that my final one.
We're at number one. Yeah, what's your number one?
Yeah, we're all at number one. So Hellbound, Hellraiser 2.
Oh man,
is my final one.
I could have guessed. Yeah.
I'm such a fan of the Hellraiser films. Even the shitty ones could, you know, make me laugh, and I could kind of have fun with. But I think what really carries Hellbound, and I think of even why I'm going to say a hot take that it's even better than the original, is just how cryptic, mythic, and demonic it really is.
Good way to put it.
You know, I really think it feels like you're trapped. It's almost like Labyrinth, but with an R rating. I think
that definitely felt Jim Henson like, yeah, especially the design too.
That's what I thought after finishing the movie. I'm like, this is Labyrinth with an R rating, and God, it really goes all the way. But this is a movie about, you know, Kirsty after the events of the first one, where the occult obsessive head doctor resurrects Julia from the first movie and unleashes the Cenobites and their demonic world.
Yeah.
I just find it to be a perfect sequel. It basically takes what was there for the first one, you know, which was more of a kind of single location, erotic, you know, also fucked up movie. But here, in Hellbound, they make it a lot more mythic, and they add to the lore of Hellraiser and Pinhead. They set up, you know, Pinhead's backstory. They set up a lot more about what hell looks like in Hellraiser. It's not where everyone's getting tortured, but it's actually a world where you're kind of trapped and you don't know where you're going. It provides instant anxiety and terror because you have no idea where the exits are. It's a never-ending puzzle. Basically.
Disorienting for sure.
It's just a puzzle, which I find to be way creepier than being burned alive or being tortured. To be trapped somewhere and not know how to get out.
True.
But on top of that, I think Tony Randall, the director, did such a great job. I mean, I think the script is a really really great script by Peter Atkins here, and Clive Barker helped with the story too. So he had some input on this idea, but I think just what they did for the Hellraiser series, they just really elevated it, and the score is just ear-piercing and phenomenal. And just I would really recommend this if you're ever. It's very twisted and dark, but if you're looking for something to kind of say more about, what hell might be like, or what your fears are, that's what this movie really taps into. And I also want to say one of my favorite lines from this movie. If you're really into just like stuff that taps into your fears and makes you feel really gross, like you need to take a shower after. Hellraiser 2 is that movie.
Pretty nasty.
It's really that movie. And one of my favorite quotes from this movie is when the doctor, I won't spoil it, but the doctor says, "And to have thoughts, I hesitated." Sorry about the quote mess up, but
no problem.
It's just such an iconic moment when he steps out of this configuration and he finally realizes just how much this world of like pleasure and pain could actually provide happiness for him. It's really decrepit and twisted. So
wow.
I would really recommend anyone that wants to watch something very gothic. You will not be disappointed if you want to see Labyrinth on cocaine.
Oh yeah.
Stuck in a maze.
Yeah, I was shocked by it too when you showed me that a few months ago. It was a mental trip, but also like deeply gory too, and like a really cerebral experience for sure. It's just kind of how it separates itself from the first movie, because the first one was really rooted into the couple, the affair. I mean, and like the family kind of deteriorating, sort of as like an allegory sort of thing. But yeah, Hellraiser 2 just goes all out with the pinhead aspect of everything and kind of unleashing hell on the viewer. So yeah, it's a great pick, man. And I heard you load that up in your phone in case you're on the toilet too long.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll just rewatch all my favorite pinhead scenes.
He's got it on Amazon Prime, bought and paid for, queued up at all times. Great movie. Yeah, I second that. Hellraiser 2 is. They probably put it on at Kuma's Corner sometimes.
It's weird. Yeah, it's such a metal movie, honestly.
It's so metal, yeah.
You could probably blast like some metal soundtrack and it would fit with every scene.
I'm so glad you brought up metal, because that leads into my number one really well. My number one is kind of what inspired me to want to do this list, because I've been wanting to talk about this movie on the podcast for a long time, and just in general, because again, like I only have a few people in my life that have seen this movie. But The Devil's Candy, which came out in 2015, directed by, oddly enough, I have two Australian directors on my list. Sean Byrne, who directed The Loved Ones, which is also a really great, more comedic torture movie. But The Loved Ones is great, but his follow-up, The Devil's Candy, in my opinion, is like a modern horror masterpiece. It's about, again, really typical, kind of archetypal plot setup where a family moves into their dream home. It's in like rural Texas. It's really remote. Ethan Embry, who stars and is absolutely incredible in this movie, is an artist, and his daughter plays guitar. They're sort of a family of artists, and they all were experiencing writer's blocks. They're like, hey, let's go to Texas and see if we can get inspired. And lo and behold, the house is haunted as fuck. They start being possessed by satanic forces, and Ethan Embry, who is an artist, like a visual artist, starts painting these really metal, satanic paintings, and his daughter starts playing this really, satanic metal music. So I like to describe it as a modern day Shining movie, but infused with metal. And there's a serial killer on the loose as well, so that comes into play. There's a lot going on in this movie. It's an 80-minute. Really lean, to the point movie, incredibly well edited and shot. Like the visuals are gorgeous. Like obviously you can imagine Ethan Embry's paintings are like really disturbing and sort of thematically linked to the plot, which they are, but they're so good to look at. And there's a rhythm of this movie that just, I always think about it when Halloween time comes, because it's like one of those horror movies that it's like to the rhythm of metal music, because the soundtrack, and sort of like obviously, like I said, his daughter plays metal, so like there's kind of the stylistic choice is like to metal music. So I feel like Sean Byrne was really inspired by metal, albums, trying to make his own like metal horror movie. And I'm not even a big metal fan in terms of music, but this movie, it just works on every level. Like it's unique in tone. It's scary as hell. The acting's incredible. The visuals are amazing. Just super underappreciated, like the people that have seen it love it, but the people that haven't seen it they just have to watch it, because like I feel like as a horror fan, it gives you everything you could want. So yeah, that's my number one, man. I've been a huge fan of that movie for a long time, and same with all the other movies that we talked about today. So I feel like we covered a lot of great horror movies there, man.
Yeah, honestly, we covered a lot of aspects of horror,
Yeah, like when we were preparing this, we were like, let's try to cover, different countries, different subgenres, the slasher, possession, all that good stuff. But, in the end, I really picked the ones that are close to my heart, horror movies that I genuinely love, that, maybe only a few thousand people have talked to, logged on Letterboxd and stuff like that.
Definitely.
So yeah, man, there's actually one last thing I want to do, because we were talking about, or you had brought up Mount Rushmore of horror.
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be fun if we end it. What's your Mount Rushmore of horror? Who's your top 4 horror directors? Just on the top of your head,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely John Carpenter.
Yeah.
I mean, his stuff has been so foundational, not only in college, but
before that for me, yeah.
Yeah, even before that for some people, but in college and since then, it's every year I'm watching 2 or 3 Carpenters and just being astounded by each one.
Absolutely.
What's one for you? We'll go back to you for a second.
Carpenter's definitely on mine, and I second everything you said. Cronenberg definitely has to be up there for me. Okay. Definitely I feel like has the most distinct style of most, of the acclaimed horror directors today. Yeah. But I just love how his career is kind of ebbed and flows into different, aspects of horror. He's not even, movies that aren't necessarily horror movies, like History of Violence and Eastern Promises and stuff. But like just this year, he had one of my favorite movies of the year with Crimes of the Future, which is like an odd blend of body horror, but also noir and sci-fi, post-apocalyptic aspects as well. To me, he is the most distinct voice in horror, but also explores the themes that might be extremely taboo and under the surface that most horror directors, don't often go down. So, I don't have to sell Cronenberg. You guys know he's amazing. We did a whole episode on him. Do you want me to keep going with?
Yeah, you
I can name my other ones.
Finish up your other 2.
So Carpenter, we got Cronenberg. I'll say Argento. I got to name one Italian guy for me. I'm a huge fan of Italian horror. You mentioned Giallo and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, Argento has arguably 3 of the best, in my opinion, with Opera, Suspiria, and Deep Red. Phenomena. He's got so many wonderful movies. And it's hard for I could pick Fulci, Bava, any of those guys, but I guess Argento introduced me to Italian horror and got me into those other directors, so I have to kind of pay homage to him that way. So he'd definitely be up there. Man, that's tough for number 4. I would just go Craven, honestly. Like we mentioned him before, I could try to be cool and pick someone more obscure, but Craven's, you can't argue with that resume. And probably of Carpenter, Cronenberg, and Argento makes the purest horror movies of all of them. Like he doesn't, besides the musical that he directed with Meryl Streep, he never really veered off into anything outside of slashers and maybe Red Eye you can argue as a thriller, but I think he stayed true to the genre all the way through. And like Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream and alone, having 2 of those franchises birthed out of his brain, like I feel like you can't argue with that. So and he's like Carpenter, like we said, he kind of got me into horror at a really young age. So shout out to Wes. I have a feeling you're gonna bring up someone that I forgot, but yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I'm surprised on your list, no Sam Raimi.
I thought about it, but
he hasn't.
I don't know if there's enough to warrant it.
Yeah.
The 4 that I love, Evil Dead and Drag Me to Hell. I don't know. Fuck, you're right. I should have maybe.
Maybe. I don't know.
Honorable mention Sam Raimi. Thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, go ahead, though.
Yeah, for me, definitely Romero.
Absolutely.
You know, I mentioned him earlier, but Night of the Living Dead I watched in like 3rd grade, and ever since then I saw Diary of the Dead, I think 6th grade, and I'm just honestly, he's what made me fall in love with the genre in some way. And I think now that I've gotten older, I've appreciated the deeper meanings to his movies. You know, it's not just cut and dry like, you know, we might come to expect in the horror genre. Not only him, but I'm going to put Wes Craven also on that list.
Oh yeah.
Even I think I've seen like 13 Wes Cravens now, and I'm always astounded. Even if the movie's not great, there's something, you know, maybe his presence behind the camera, or there's something about the performance that he's getting out of the movie or the style that you still can't appreciate. I have a whole section on my Blu-ray shelf dedicated for him right now because I own so many, you know.
Yeah, you do.
See, I see him over there.
You look at it right now.
You know. And then, other than...
So you got 3.
Yeah, I got 3, and I want to add in Guillermo del Toro.
Ooh, that's a good pick, too.
You know, I know a lot of people know about him, but I think he's just a modern master. I've loved every single one of his movies, and he was so foundational, you know, for me. Not only Pan's Labyrinth, Crimson Peak, even Devil's Backbone,
right?
And even we love
Kronos.
Yeah, Kronos.
That was on my other honorable mentions list. I just didn't get to it. Yeah,
Kronos,
Kronos is mad underrated.
So underrated. But as a director, I just love what he makes, and he has such a love for the craft. Yeah, you see it in all of his movies after you're done watching them. You know, I just always think to myself, I just want to go and make something again. He's so inspirational. He's so inspirational. And I just love watching his interviews. I always even watch that with him just because I just love him so much. He has such a great personality.
He is wonderful, yeah.
But that's my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. The ones I was going to say that I thought you were going to mention was Hitchcock, because
Hitchcock, yeah. Maybe,
I feel like it was too obvious to say, but
I know.
You know, obviously Hitchcock's super inspirational to all of us, but
definitely.
I feel like he was one I forgot. I was thinking like Korean, like you mentioned Bong Joon-ho or like Park Chan-wook.
Definitely.
But again, kind of like what I was saying about Cronenberg, like a lot of these, even Guillermo del Toro to some extent, you know, they've carved their own sort of genre just with their films. You know, they've created like a subgenre, like, oh, that's a Cronenberg movie, that's a Guillermo del Toro movie, because it's like, you know, you can look at Guillermo del Toro, his movies are really gothic and fantastical. Cronenberg's are really pessimistic and dry, you know.
Yeah.
So I loved Guillermo del Toro too, because like, and obviously Cronenberg, because like there's this, they carved their own little place in horror, you know, they kind of elevated it in some way. So yeah, I think that, you know, there's probably, we can go on forever with other horror directors that could potentially be on there, man. There's so many. But yeah, guys, let us know if you've seen any of the movies on our list. You know, we'd love to hear, and obviously we'd love to hear more recommendations for what you think are the most underrated horror gems out there. There's, you know, everyone's got their list, I feel like, and everyone has a different list. So yeah, happy October, guys. Happy spooky season, and yeah, we'll catch you later. Thanks.
Yeah, happy Halloween. Thanks for tuning in. Post in the comments, you know, some recommendations of your own.